He drained my savings, ghosted me, and now he's marrying my best friend. And they had the audacity to invite me. The email arrived on a Tuesday. No greeting, no explanation, just a PDF with a blush pink banner reading, "You're invited. Lisa and Nate, September 17th. A celebration of love, resilience, and destiny." Destiny. That word hit harder than it should have. I sat at my desk, phone buzzing with work notifications I couldn't bring myself to open. For a full minute, I stared at the screen, paralyzed. Not because I was hurt, no, that came later. I was stunned because they had made it official, public, permanent. And they wanted me to smile through it. Lisa, my best friend since we were 10. Nate, the man I married at 29 after a year of long talks, promises, and co-signed loans. The same man who vanished just 14 months later with a vague email about needing space to figure things out. The same Lisa who cried with me when I couldn't reach him, who said he was a coward but maybe just lost. They'd been gone, both of them, 2 years now. No texts, no updates. And yet here they were, smiling in pastel outfits on a wedding invite, planning a vineyard ceremony like nothing had happened. But something had happened. To me. I didn't reply, I didn't scream, I didn't forward it to anyone. I just opened a folder on my computer I hadn't touched in months. It was called Unfinished. Inside were screenshots, receipts, loan documents, a single unsent email I wrote the night Nate disappeared. I'd poured out everything in that draft. How he'd taken my money to launch his brand. How he convinced me to invest in a website I never saw. How Lisa kept saying he just needs time. I'd been naive, but not stupid. I kept the proof, and now they wanted me to show up, eat cake, and pretend the past was a bad dream. No, I wasn't going to cry in my car while they kissed under fairy lights. I wasn't going to be polite, I was going to be ready. It started small. I Googled their names, out of morbid curiosity at first. Nate Daniels and Lisa Monroe. Together, they'd branded themselves as founders of a boutique wellness and digital intimacy startup, coaching couples on how to build trust and transparency in a distracted age. I almost choked. Their faces were everywhere. Instagram reels, guest spots on podcasts, newsletters about emotional alignment. They had tens of thousands of followers, and not one mention of where they got the startup funding, but I knew. They built their entire image on the foundation of my silence. So I opened a new browser tab and started listing out what I remembered: dates, amounts, locations. I found emails Nate sent me requesting urgent transfers and the PayPal receipt from the night I wired him $5,000 just until the investor pays out. He never mentioned an investor again. By midnight, I had a document. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was clarity. 3 days later, I did something even I didn't expect. I RSVP'd yes. The ceremony was set for a vineyard just outside Napa Intimate, curated, deeply meaningful, according to their wedding site. I wasn't going to scream during their vows or throw wine at Lisa's designer dress. No, I was going to be the calm in the storm, the eye they didn't see spinning toward them until it was too late. The week before the wedding, I booked a room under a different name. Printed hard copies of every transaction tied to my name, labeled a flash drive legacy, and slipped it into the lining of my purse. I wasn't sure how this would play out, but I knew one thing: I wouldn't leave that vineyard with regret. What Nate didn't know, I had power now, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't beg, the kind that waits. The morning of the wedding was cloudless, warm, too perfect. I wore black, not out of spite, out of truth. Something had died. The venue was a dream, of course. Rows of white chairs, soft music playing, glasses of champagne already in hands. Everything was photo-ready, curated for likes. I arrived exactly 5 minutes before the ceremony, unnoticed by most, except Lisa's cousin Clara, who blinked when she saw me, like I'd wandered in from a past she thought buried. And then I saw them. Nate in a tailored suit, Lisa in ivory silk, hand in hand. Laughing, I didn't flinch. I just walked to my seat like any polite guest. But I watched them, every smile, every whisper, every moment they tried to sell the illusion of purity. My fingers tapped the flash drive in my bag, reassuring myself that this wasn't impulse, it was intention. When the officiant asked if anyone knows a reason why these two should not be joined, my breath caught. Not because I was going to speak, because Lisa's eyes found mine, just for a second. And something changed. Her smile faltered, like she saw a ghost or a reckoning. I didn't speak, I just smiled, because the real disruption wasn't going to come during their vows. It would come later, when the emails arrived, when the blog post went live, when the sponsors pulled back, when the truth whispered louder than their performance ever could. They thought the worst thing I could do was show up. They had no idea the worst thing I could do was stay silent, just long enough. By the time the cake was cut, I had already scheduled the leak. I didn't touch the champagne, didn't mingle, just watched. Every word out of their mouths was performance. How they met during a shared spiritual awakening. How their journey was born from hardship and turned into love. The crowd ate it up. No one knew the hardship was me. I let them have their applause. For now. That night, after the last toast faded and guests filtered toward shuttles, I went back to my rental and opened my laptop. I uploaded the files to a secure drive, created a document titled Funding the Fraud, How They Built Their Business on My Name. I didn't add commentary, just facts, transfers, email exchanges, screenshots of their old text messages, timestamps proving Lisa knew Nate was married when they ran. Then I sent it. First to a freelance journalist who'd recently covered unethical influencer startups. Then to the brand partners they'd posted about on Instagram. Then to their PR agency, no threats, no accusations. Just, you might want to verify how this brand was funded. Attachments, 6 PDFs donked one audio file as the undeniable timeline. The next morning I got a reply from the journalist. Holy shit, this is solid. Going to fact check and run it. Can I use your name? No, I typed. Not yet, but you can use the story. By lunch, I noticed Nate's company website was under maintenance. Lisa turned off comments on her last 3 posts. One brand partner, Kind Nest, archived their entire campaign together. Quiet moves, but revealing ones. They knew the blow was coming. I didn't feel powerful, not exactly, just done being quiet. 3 days passed before Lisa called me. I was sitting on my balcony with coffee, watching a storm roll in. My phone lit up. I let it ring twice before answering. Emma, she said. Her voice shook, not from fear, more like disbelief. Why? She didn't say what I did. She already knew. I didn't bother lying. You built a business on my back. You married the man who conned me, and then you tried to rewrite the story like I was never part of it. A pause. Then, it wasn't like that. No, I said. I still have the contracts you emailed me pretending to be his assistant, asking for invoices, confirming transfers. Want me to forward them to the IRS too? Silence. I was your friend, she whispered. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You were my shadow, and when you saw something shiny, you didn't hesitate to stab me in the back to reach it. She tried again. We were scared. He didn't know what to do. He panicked. He didn't panic, I snapped. He planned. You both did. And now the story you curated is cracking. Another silence. Then came the tone I remembered so well, measured, slippery. What do you want? And there it was, the real question, the one people like her always ask once guilt doesn't work. I don't want anything, I said. I want you to lose what you stole. She hung up. That night, the article went live. Love, Lies and Startup Scams, the story behind one wellness brand's crumbling facade. It didn't trend, it detonated. Screenshots were everywhere, podcasts picked it up. People began stitching clips from their wedding with headlines calling them grifters. Their story unraveled in real time. One detail stood out. The journalist had included a section on how I never asked for repayment, just the truth. That's what hit people hardest, not the fraud, not the affair, the audacity of pretending it never happened. By the end of the week, 2 more sponsors pulled out. Lisa's face vanished from an event page. Nate's LinkedIn profile went dark, but I wasn't done yet. I went back through the legal files. Nate had once tried to get me to sign a dissolution of marital assets form, one I never signed, one that still had legal weight. He'd marked our shared funds as venture losses, but never claimed them on taxes. So I forwarded that to my attorney. Let her follow the paper trail, and while she did, I uploaded one last file to a private Dropbox, an audio message Nate left me the night before he disappeared. "Babe, just trust me, okay? I'm doing this for us. I'll make it back. I swear I'll fix everything." It didn't sound malicious. It sounded manipulative. Soft lies, practiced over years. I knew that voice well. The following Monday, I received a message from someone unexpected, a woman named Natalie. "Hi, I saw the article. I just wanted to say thank you. I dated Nate 6 years ago. He did something similar to me, but I never had proof. I thought I was crazy. I'm not. So, thanks for not being quiet." I stared at her words for a long time, not out of pride, out of recognition. How many others were there? This was never just about me. It was about what people like Nate and Lisa think they can get away with. I closed the message, opened a new document, and typed 4 words. This is just beginning. The legal documents landed on Nate's desk before noon. Cease and desist. Formal notice of breach. Request for financial disclosure related to our marriage dissolution, which, according to the state, was never fully processed. That meant anything he built using joint assets was still, technically, contestable. I didn't send them myself. My attorney did. I wasn't interested in emotional retaliation. I wanted legal precision. By sunset, Lisa posted a story from a hiking trail, captioned, "Choosing peace over poison always." It was a weak attempt at control. A smokescreen. The comments below told a different story. "So, you're going to talk about the article?" "Peace? You scammed your friend. Wow, gaslighting in real time." I didn't engage. They were unraveling without my help. A week later, my attorney confirmed it. Nate's company had received early seed funding that was never reported, under a joint account with my name on it. One I had closed, but not before he'd used it to apply for credit, illegally. That gave us leverage. The IRS was already aware, thanks to a quiet tip. I didn't need to follow up. They would. Lisa's name appeared on a 1099 from a brand partnership tied to the same year Nate vanished. More leverage. We weren't just talking about betrayal anymore, we were talking fraud. I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through their old posts. Lisa once claimed they built their empire from scratch. In a podcast, she said she'd been burned by fake friends and how truth always finds its way. I copied that quote and saved it in a folder titled Self-Owns, because the truth had found its way, and it was coming for her in waves. Lisa reached out again the next day, this time by email. "Emma, I know you're hurt, but you're blowing this up into something it's not. You're affecting real people, our business, our family. I hope you can take a step back and see what this is doing to everyone involved. Everyone involved, she meant herself." I replied with one sentence. "Actions have consequences. That's all this is." I didn't sign it. I didn't have to. She knew exactly who I was now. By the time the podcast episode dropped, featuring the journalist who ran my story, it had already gone viral. The host read parts of the documents aloud, redacted for names, but detailed enough. One line stood out. "If she hadn't come forward, this would have kept going. People don't stop unless they're made to." And then came the messages. From strangers. from women, from former clients of Nate's, old co-workers, people who said they noticed something off but never thought to speak. Some shared screenshots, others shared audio. A few offered depositions if it came to court. I catalogued everything. This wasn't revenge anymore, it was documentation, it was a case. And then came the first sign that they were scared. Nate's company website changed overnight. The About Us page was gone, their bios scrubbed. Lisa's role was reduced to external collaborator. They released a vague statement. Due to a miscommunication in our early funding sources, we are undergoing restructuring. Miscommunication, the word people use when they've been caught but don't want to admit guilt. I sent the page to my attorney. She added it to our file. "We'll use this," she said, then paused. "And you might want to prepare for a countersuit." I didn't blink. "They can try," I said, because now I had more than proof. I had momentum. The next move wasn't mine, it was the state's. Nate received a formal audit request. Lisa was named in a complaint filed by one of her sponsors who felt misled about the brand's origin story. Turns out they'd signed her under the impression she was the sole founder of a grassroots women-led startup. The irony nearly made me laugh. She wasn't even the architect of the scam, just the most photogenic pawn. And yet, she played her role so willingly. A month passed. Quietly, steadily, things changed. Nate removed all comments from his social media. Their podcast RSS feed disappeared. Their coaching platform sent a mass email saying the program was on pause. One former client replied with a public tweet, "If you're wondering why your mentors ghosted you, Google their names." People did, and when they did, they found more than my story. They found themselves. I wasn't on a warpath, I was on a path of clarity. And somewhere in the process, I realized something. They didn't ruin me. They freed me from needing to be liked, from needing to explain, from needing to carry the shame they created. They thought disappearing from my life was the end of their damage, but what they never considered, what people like them never consider, is that the quiet ones aren't weak. We're just waiting for the right time to speak, and when we do, we don't shout, we show. It wasn't the article that destroyed them, it was everything that followed, too fast for them to spin, too real to deny. 1 week after the exposé dropped, their coaching site redirected to a broken link. The testimonials page vanished. Their sponsors didn't release statements, they just disappeared one by one. I watched quietly as brand logos they'd once flaunted were scrubbed clean from their platforms. I hadn't done anything dramatic. I hadn't spoken publicly or posted any accusations. All I did was shine a light, and they withered under it. Nate sent the first legal threat. A PDF from his lawyer claiming defamation, emotional distress, damage to public image. I didn't panic. I sent it to my attorney, who emailed back the next morning, "They don't have a case, but we might." That same day, she filed a motion, financial misrepresentation, failure to disclose joint income, improper use of a co-owned business account. We had bank transfers, time-stamped emails, even a credit application Nate had submitted using my credentials after our separation. It wasn't revenge, it was accountability, and it was legal. Lisa finally broke her silence with a live video. No tears, just spin. She said she had been manipulated, that Nate lied to her too, that she only learned the truth recently and was as heartbroken as anyone. She said my name once, no apology, just, "Emma's version of events is her truth." Her truth, not the truth. The comments turned against her within minutes. You were her best friend. You forged payment requests. You knew. I didn't respond publicly, I didn't need to, but I did send one email to the same journalist who had published my story. I gave her access to the Dropbox folder. Inside were Lisa's email headers, time-stamped, proof she had knowledge of the transactions months before Nate left. Screenshots of her booking flights using the same stolen card. The journalist followed up with a second piece, a second layer, the emails that show this wasn't a one-man scam. That article hit harder than the first because this time Lisa was no longer a bystander. Their lawyer called my attorney, offering to settle quietly. It was a soft panic. They wanted it to stop, not because they regretted it, but because it had started costing them money, relevance, reputation. I declined, not out of spite, but because a quiet end would have taught them nothing. Around this time, I heard from Mia. She had worked with Nate years ago, before me. She said he'd borrowed money from her too, under a joint venture, then vanished. She'd never pressed charges. She felt ashamed, alone, like no one would believe her. She sent me a copy of the contract he wrote by hand. Same language, same strategy, same promises. I added it to the file. By now, we had more than a pattern. We had a history of fraud. He had done this before. Lisa had likely seen it happen in real time and decided it was easier to join him than to stop him. One of their clients, a woman named Tara, filed a formal complaint. She had paid for relationship coaching, only to be ghosted after sending a deposit. She contacted the Better Business Bureau, then the local Consumer Fraud Division. Lisa's coaching license was quietly suspended. That was the first official consequence, but not the last. A state investigator opened a review into their financial conduct. Apparently, multiple people had submitted reports since the story broke. What started as a wedding scandal had morphed into something systemic. They'd thought I would eventually get tired and move on. They didn't understand. This was never personal anymore. This was structural. And then something unexpected happened. I was asked to speak, privately, to a support group for women who'd experienced financial betrayal in relationships. The organizer had read the article. She said, "You put into words what most of us never could." I almost said no, but I went. I told them the facts, the timeline, the ways I ignored red flags because I thought loyalty meant silence, no dramatics, no vengeance speech, just truth. And when I finished, a woman in the back said, "You didn't destroy them, you just stopped carrying the lie." I sat with that for a long time, because she was right. Lisa and Nate haven't disappeared, not entirely. They're still online, less polished, less loud, no sponsors, no tours, no speeches about resilience, just occasional posts about new beginnings. Let them start over, just not on someone else's back again. The last thing I did was call the bank that had helped Nate set up that initial line of credit under my name. I gave them the documents, proof of misuse. They flagged the account, closed it, and submitted an internal fraud report. It wasn't dramatic. It was clean, quiet, precise, just like everything I'd done since the day I opened that invitation. They thought they erased me, but all they did was give me clarity. And with clarity, I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to beg. I just needed to follow the truth until it landed exactly where it was meant to. By the third hearing, Nate stopped showing up. His attorney came alone, always with a new excuse: travel, illness, scheduling conflict. The judge wasn't amused. Every postponement just confirmed what we already knew. They were stalling. Hoping I'd back off, hoping public memory would fade. It didn't. By then, the fraud investigation was in motion, and while my name was on the initial complaint, others had joined, quietly, one by one. I wasn't the only one they'd used, just the first to fight back with documentation. Lisa submitted a written statement, nothing emotional, just positioning. I had no knowledge of financial misuse at the time. I was not legally involved in the transactions. My relationship with Mr. Daniels began after his previous marriage had ended. It was carefully worded, safe, empty, but we had evidence that contradicted it: email headers, joint travel records, even a coaching registration form she'd signed using the company card linked to the stolen funds. She knew, she participated, and she was about to be named. My attorney called the morning we filed the civil suit. "You'll want to sit down," she said. I didn't, she continued. "We uncovered 2 new accounts, both opened in your name. Nate used your social, your former address. They're tied to his business." I felt nothing, just another layer of theft. She said we had grounds for identity fraud, not just civil, but criminal. It was up to me if I wanted to escalate. I said yes. Lisa reached out again, this time through her assistant. A formal message asking if I'd consider private mediation instead of taking it to court. She wanted to resolve this constructively. She offered a statement, a small payment, a signed NDA. I didn't respond. I had spent enough of my life giving people like her the benefit of the doubt. People who rewrite harm as miscommunication. People who think silence equals forgiveness. I passed the message to my attorney, who drafted a one-line reply. "The time for private conversations has passed." I started seeing them differently now, not as villains in some story I needed to outrun, but as patterns, repeating ones, predictable ones. Take, deny, reframe, disappear. I used to think exposing them would bring closure, that once the truth was public, I'd feel something like relief. But closure isn't delivered by court orders. It's in the quiet moment where you realize you don't need their apology to move on. The court date was confirmed for the following month. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't rehearse what I'd say if they showed up. I didn't even think about what I'd wear. That part of me, obsessed with being palatable, presentable, was gone. I was there to finish what I started. Nothing more. 3 days before the hearing, the journalist published a follow-up. This time, it wasn't just about Nate and Lisa. It was about the women who had come forward. Women who lost money, time, confidence. The story wove through our accounts like thread pulled tight. Separate wounds, same pattern. The headline read, "He called it mentorship. They called it theft." I read it once. Then I sent it to my attorney. Just 2 words. "Let's proceed." Lisa sat behind her attorney with her hands folded like she was there by mistake, but the evidence said otherwise. The judge overruled the objection. My attorney stepped forward and presented the timeline. Lisa signing off on coaching clients using company funds, booking retreats through a shared account, replying to emails tied to Nate's business, while the legal paperwork naming me as co-owner was still active. She had been involved, not in the margins, at the center. Her lawyer pivoted quickly, claimed she'd been misled, emotionally compromised, used by a partner who controlled the narrative. The same excuses Nate used, slightly rebranded. I watched Lisa closely. She didn't flinch, didn't protest. She didn't deny it because she didn't have to. Her silence was the last tool she had left, and it wasn't working anymore. After court, my attorney and I met in a quiet room off the hallway. She handed me a small file. "Settlement offer," she said, "from Lisa's side." Inside was a typed statement. Lisa admitted limited responsibility, offered a payout, and requested confidentiality going forward. The number was higher than I expected. It was smart, calculated, desperate. They were trying to end it quietly again. I slid the paper back across the table. "No." "You're sure?" I nodded. "I don't want her money. I want the ruling. Not because I needed to win in court, because I needed something they couldn't spin." The ruling came 2 weeks later. Fraud confirmed. Identity misuse upheld. Joint assets restored. Lisa was held partially liable, not as the originator of the scheme, but as an active participant. Nate was ordered to appear for a separate fraud hearing. He didn't show. A bench warrant was issued. His attorney resigned from the case. Just like that, their empire collapsed from the inside. I didn't announce the outcome online. No victory post, no told you so. Instead, I walked back into my life, quietly, steadily. I changed my phone number, closed old accounts, opened new ones in my legal name. I removed my emergency contact from anything tied to either of them. My records were clean, my credit restored, my name cleared. What they had taken wasn't money, not just, it was credibility, time, sleep, trust. I didn't want revenge anymore, I wanted my space back, and now I had it. 3 months passed, I moved cities, no announcements, no forwarding address, just distance, clean and deliberate. One afternoon, I received a handwritten letter with no return name. I opened it, unsure why I didn't throw it away. It was from Lisa. Just a page, no envelope design, no theatrics. I didn't know how far it would go. I let it happen. I watched it happen. You didn't deserve it. I know that now. She didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't try to explain. That was the most honest thing she'd ever done. I placed the letter in a drawer and didn't respond. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindicated. I was done. Weeks later, I joined a private support circle, not to talk, to listen. The women there weren't interested in attention. They came with stories that never made headlines: financial abuse, gaslighting, contracts signed under pressure, trust traded for control. One of them shared a phrase I hadn't heard before. You don't need a villain to justify your boundaries. I wrote it down because that's what it had become. Not a war, not justice, just a boundary I was finally strong enough to enforce. Lisa stopped posting. Nate was still unreachable, his accounts frozen, assets under review. He became a cautionary headline in a white-collar fraud blog, quietly forgotten by everyone except the people he'd harmed. I didn't follow the case. I didn't need to know how it ended for them. They'd already chosen their consequences when they chose to lie. One morning, I got a message from someone I didn't recognize, a woman named Wren. I don't know you, but I followed your case. I was too scared to report mine, but I saw what you did, and now I know I'm not crazy. So, thank you. I didn't reply, but I smiled. Not because I won, but because I knew what it meant for someone else to feel seen. That was enough. 6 months after the ruling, I stopped checking for updates. I didn't care if Nate resurfaced. I didn't track Lisa's accounts. I didn't monitor press coverage or dig through the analytics of who was still talking. I had no interest in their next moves because I had already taken mine. This wasn't about erasing them. It was about reclaiming everything they tried to steal without consequence, and I had. The house I lived in now was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from hiding, but the kind that doesn't require defense. My time was no longer drained by paperwork, calls, or preparing for the next legal move. My thoughts didn't circle around questions of what if or why. Some things just happen, not because you deserved them, not because you missed a sign, but because certain people never learned how to take without destroying, and when they finally meet resistance, they call it cruelty. I still had the folder, the one with screenshots, emails, legal filings. It lived in the back of a locked cabinet. Not because I needed it anymore, but because it's important to remember where the story actually began. Not at the betrayal, but at the moment I stopped begging to be heard. People love to rewrite your pain once they realize it made them look small, but evidence doesn't blink. One afternoon, I got coffee with someone from the support group. She had gone through her own storm, different shape, same wound. She asked how I stayed composed during everything. I didn't lie. I told her there were nights I wanted to burn it all down, days I could barely hold a fork without shaking. I told her I cried on the floor once because I realized I didn't have a single photo left that didn't have them in it, not one. But I also told her this. They didn't win because they broke me. They lost because I rebuilt without asking permission. I started writing again, not about them, not even about me. I wrote stories for women who needed to hear themselves in someone else's voice. I didn't share them publicly, just small circles, a few readers at a time. Sometimes healing doesn't ask for an audience, it just wants a witness. A year passed. A woman named Julia reached out. She was a researcher compiling data on financial coercion in domestic relationships. She'd read about the case, followed it quietly, and was now building a platform to support victims. She asked if I'd be open to sharing parts of my experience anonymously. I said yes, but only if I could speak honestly, not polished, not sanitized. She agreed, so I sent her my timeline, the raw version, not the one trimmed for courts or curated for lawyers, the one with all the notes, all the hesitations, all the moments I almost didn't act. 2 weeks later, she messaged, I showed it to a group in Denver. One woman cried after reading it. She said it was the first time she believed herself. That was the first time I cried since the hearing, not for what I lost, but for what I gave back. As for Lisa, I haven't heard from her since that letter. I don't hate her. I don't think about her unless someone mentions that part of my life. And even then, it's like remembering a role I no longer play. A version of me that stayed too quiet for too long. I don't need an apology. I don't need an explanation. Some people carry guilt, others carry patterns, and you learn to stop trying to change people who confuse apologies with strategy. Nate, he's still under review, his business filings flagged, his social accounts inactive. The last update from my attorney was short. He's burned every bridge. You won't be hearing from him. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. One night, I walked the edge of a nearby park where I now spend mornings journaling. I stopped at the far end near the tree line, took a breath, and realized something I hadn't said out loud before. It wasn't justice that brought me peace. It was my refusal to carry what wasn't mine, their shame, their excuses, their false narrative. I put it all down the day I chose myself. This story didn't end with court papers or headlines. It ended with a decision. To stop letting people take from me without naming it. To stop protecting the version of events that made them feel better. To stop accepting silence as a form of survival. If someone asks me now what happened, I don't hesitate. I say, they took everything they could, and I took it all back, piece by piece, without screaming, without permission. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a locked door they'll never have a key to again.